The time is just gone 17 minutes past 8 as we kick off this morning, taking a look at this whole question surrounding the normalization deal with Israel. Now, many of us will recall the normalization with a number of countries, Arab countries in particular. And there was all this talk about Saudi Arabia and a normalization with Israel. Now, this issue was quite a major talking point in the build up to the genocide that we see now unfolding in Gaza. And many were of the view that this deal was on the cards at that point in time, but was put on hold as a result of this genocide that is unfolding. And this is an issue that is cropping up once again. And this is the reason why we are talking with Jeenah, who is a senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. MISTRA. Naeem, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jummah Mubarak to you. And Naeem, it is clear that a major talking point has always been Saudi Arabia and Israel. At what point in time will this normalization take place or not even take place? But we are now starting to see certain rumblings. We see certain noises being made. And this is an issue that is now cropping up once again.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there was a visit, it seems, leaked news about it has been leaked. A visit of U.S. officials, U.S. Congress people to Saudi Arabia, who met with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who effectively now runs the country, of course, and discussed this issue. And there were, it seemed from the leaks of the meetings that took place, it seems clear that Mohammed bin Salman is still on the normalization path and is keen to make it happen.
Yes. Now, we've also seen a report come out talking about obviously fearing assassination as well. And this came through on the, I think it was a Palestine Chronicle, if my memory serves me right. And it talks about the Crown Prince actually fearing assassination over normalization with Israel. Now, clearly, this is a very, very serious matter, Naeem.
Yeah, so everyone picked up the story from Politico, the online magazine, American magazine, on the issue, and they say that they got it from some of the U.S. officials that were part of the meetings. That MBS said that he fears that if normalization happens, or when normalization happens, that he might be assassinated, that there's already threats of that, etc. In the context of the whole discussion that seems to have taken place, it sounds to me more like an attempt at leveraging the negotiations process. I mean, he's trying to impress on the Americans that going down this route, that his life is actually in danger, and therefore they need to be more flexible in what they give him in return, and what they get the Israelis to give him. So whether there actually is any threat to his life, any assassination threat, I don't know. I wouldn't take I wouldn't take his word for it. And at the moment, it's only his word on it. And as I say, in the context of him trying to get more out of the Americans for the normalization.
Naeem, we've learned that this deal is largely secret. And again, it's about guarantees to Saudi Arabia in terms of security guarantees. Now, we've seen this in the past as well, where we've seen the oil for security deal that was struck by the Saudis many years ago. Saudis banking oil revenues in the United States of America, guaranteeing the security of the monarchy for as long as possible. And it appears as if this discussion and this debate has come up once again as far as the security guarantees that the United States of America is able to offer Saudi Arabia via this treaty or this normalization deal.
I think the context is quite different now compared to those many years or decades ago. South Africa, Saudi Arabia, sorry, is um, is much stronger politically, even militarily, has its own wars going, and is much more assertive. Also diplomatically, much more assertive. You'll remember that it has various kinds of deals with Russia, with China. Recently, there was a deal struck between it and Iran, mediated by China. So the Saudi Arabia of today is not the same as it was in the past. It's not completely a lackey of the United States as it used to be. So the deal that seems to be on the table, because we get this from leaks over the past year or so, from before the 7th of October, of course, when these talks had begun between Saudi Arabia and the US. So it includes a package that Mohammed bin Salman wants from the Americans, and the package includes things like agreement on weapons purchases by Saudi Arabia of some of the most advanced weapons technologies that the Americans are willing to export, including F-35 jets and all of those kinds of things. So that's the one area. The other is that Saudi Arabia wants American assistance to set up a nuclear program. They say a civilian nuclear program, but a nuclear program nevertheless. So that's the second thing that we've heard. There's a third aspect which is not in the news, and which from other sources one is able to figure out, and that is a very kind of internal domestic issue that MBS wants the American assistance on. He wants the Americans to convince the council that makes a decision about the king. So you know that in Saudi Arabia now, since King Abdullah, they set up a council, and the new king, once a king dies, the new king is not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed that whoever the previous king had appointed as crown prince will be the new king. The council decides on that. And MBS is not convinced that the council will choose him when his father dies, when Salman dies. So he wants American assistance to put pressure on various members of the council who are close to the Americans, to ensure that the scales are tipped in his favor and he becomes a shoo-in for king when Salman does die. So that many observers have said, not publicly, of course, as I said, this is not in the news, but many observers have said that for MBS, this is actually the big issue that he wants out of the Americans in order for him to agree to normalization. The kind of new thing over the past few months, since the 7th of October, is that the Israelis are now saying, the Saudis are now saying that, and this latest meeting, this has come out, that MBS has said this as well, that there will be no normalization deal unless there's a guarantee for a Palestinian state. Of course, that kind of has been thrown out the window with Netanyahu's position, very strong, firm position on that, and the vote in the Israeli parliament, in the Knesset, that decided that they will not support the establishment of a Palestinian state at all, which means a permanent occupation of what is now the occupied Palestinian territory, or even annexation. So that is now, it seems, a condition that MBS has put on the table, and that leaves the whole normalization thing in some doubt. But what is clear is that he's determined that it will happen. The normalization will happen, and so will he sacrifice that issue of a Palestinian state in order to get the other things that he wants? Possibly.
Well, Naeem, clearly the stakes are very, very high. And, when one looks at it from a risk factor, you normalize, you damned, you don't normalize, you're still damned at the end of the day, in the absence, as you mentioned, the resolution of the Palestinian crisis. But one other issue as well, which I suppose Saudi Arabia will not take their eyes off the ball is Iranian factor as well. Because we've seen what has happened. We know the association of Hamas in particular with Iran. The fact that Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated on Iranian soil as well. So this is also another factor. Although we've seen some talks take place between Saudi Arabia and Iran, one cannot exclude that fact. And we know that, as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, and in particular, looking at Iran, there is no love lost between the two of them. And looking at Netanyahu in terms of how he feels about Iran, America, their thoughts on Iran as well. So one needs to look at all of this into perspective as well. So it's not just a clear normalization deal. There are many other issues or factors that will be playing out on the sides as well.
Yes, but first let me say that I don't agree that damned if you normalize, damned if you don't. As I said, the Saudis are much stronger now in terms of the international relations than previously. They don't have to normalize. There's no reason at all for them to normalize. They can withstand American pressure on that front. Their normalization is for very selfish reasons, and in the case of MBS, personally selfish reasons. He wants to be king. On the Iranian issue, yes, you're correct. There's no love lost between Saudi Arabia and Iran on that. But remember that there's been touted by the Americans, for example, a kind of anti-Iran front in the Middle East, in which Israel and Saudi Arabia will be the main players. That talk had gone around for a while, but Saudi Arabia seems not keen on that. I think that the Saudis have come to a point where they realize that Iran is a reality. They have to accept that reality. They're not going to get rid of Iran, and the way forward is to find ways in which that can be managed. They regard Iran as a threat, but the way to deal with it is to manage that threat, not to arm up and try and fight it. And hence the kind of deal that was made, mediated by China. And what we've heard is that the China deal was actually requested by the Saudis, not by the Iranians. It was a long-term oil deal that was being discussed by Saudi Arabia and China, and Saudi Arabia said they would accept the deal if China were able to mediate a treaty with Iran. So the fact that the initiative for that came from Saudi Arabia indicates, number one, that they want to find a way of, in the long term, managing the conflict with Iran, and even if it's an uneasy kind of a peace, but manage it in that way. Secondly, it indicates that that Saudi Arabia knows that the United States has no leverage over Iran, and therefore a country like China would be more useful. Thirdly, that despite whatever might be said in these meetings about the relationship with China, the oil deal is a long-term deal that Saudi Arabia has made with China, and it includes Iran and all of these factors. This is not going away. So even if they decide on an agreement with the U.S. that includes normalization with Israel, that might strain the relationships for a while with Iran. But the treaty with Iran and the trade agreements with China are not going away. So Saudi Arabia is in a very different position now than it was in the past. And that is precisely why I'm saying that they can say no to normalization. They have the power to do so.
Well, they certainly do, because I think, like you mentioned, the ball game has certainly changed over a period of time, and what the Americans fear most is the recognition or non-recognition as a superpower by a country like Saudi Arabia, and leading more towards China. And we know that China obviously emerging as a superpower very, very fast. In fact, it is a superpower in any case. And I think all of that put into perspective, BRICS as well, Saudi Arabia part of BRICS. So all these other geopolitics, global political dynamics that are actually playing out. So, you correctly mentioned this ball game is a very, very different ball game now than what it was years ago.
Yes, and Saudi Arabia's kind of assertiveness, which is not, it's not sudden, and it hasn't come about just because of MBS, although he has taken it to a new level. I think it's been developing slowly. It means that now they play the field. Uh, they're not an American proxy in the Middle East as they used to be. They play the field. They have relations with Russia, which in one might say is at war with the United States in some ways. They have relations, increasingly good relations with China. They're flirting with BRICS, not completely in, not completely out, and will use that as leverage to get what they want from the Americans. So it is a different ball game, as you say, and it is a different Saudi Arabia, but that also with its new ruler, of course, Mohammed bin Salman, with its new ruler, it's also a much more mercenary and Machiavellian kind of player on the regional and global stage.
Well, Naeem, we're going to have to leave it at that. And I know, you and I can go on for the better part of the next half an hour because there's just so many other issues to unpack. But for now, we thank you. We say Jazakallah. Have yourself a wonderful Jummah as well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
You too. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Naeem Jeenah was us this morning. And with that, we're going to go for a quick break. Next up, we're going to analyze Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi's State of the Province address.